Okay, so I like to have this Torah learning in the merit of my father and the Rabbi. Okay, let's see where we're up to. I want to start today actually from the book of The Path of the Righteous Gentile, because we skipped it last time. We didn't have a chance. We got so involved in the other book that we didn't do any halacha last time. We didn't do any law. So chapter 12, honoring father and mother. In the Path of the Righteous Gentile, I have it as page 111. Okay, paragraph 1. Although the children of Noah are not commanded to honor father and mother, they have accepted the obligation of performing this meritorious act from the beginning of time and have distinguished themselves through the ages with this righteous behavior. So, it's a kind of introductory telling us it's not one of the seven. However, it's something that's been accepted going way back. Now, you may remember that, well, those of you who were with me from the beginning of this class, when we were studying from the Universal Laws, Universal Ethics book, there was some introductory comments there and introductory rules, and from time to time I'll bring up some of them. One of the things we discussed there was that if the Noahide community takes upon themselves a certain mitzvah, a certain stricture, then that gives it a certain kind of a weight that wouldn't otherwise have. That the Noahide community can take upon themselves more commandments or adopt the seven in a more strict fashion, and then that then rests on the community. Then that falls on the community to continue that. So what I'm saying is basically I'm saying that there's also a halachic point here. It's not just a story in paragraph 1 here that he's saying, this is something that the children of Noah accepted upon, that's something they did, but it actually has a halachic weight that it becomes kind of, a similar weight to the seven. Of course, again, not exactly, but the point is it gains a certain amount of equivalency because it's been taken upon, the children of Noah took it upon themselves to do it. Okay. Now, of course, also, this is a mitzvah that has a very rational basis for it in terms of ethics. First of all, the matter of gratitude that our parents brought us up and took care of us, And even in a case if a parent doesn't always do exactly, the right thing, so to speak, and really take care, but they brought us into the world. At the end of the day, they brought us into the world. What bigger kindness is that, from a certain sense, right? So there's a certain ethical obligation for a person to respect their parents and to try to assist them when the time comes. Okay, see the second paragraph here on page 111. The Talmud tells the story of Doma ben Nesina, one of the children of Noah who excelled in the performance of honoring his father to the highest degree. Doma ben Nesina lived in a small village, and it was learned by the sages of Israel that he had possession of a rare gem the sages wanted for the Holy Temple. They traveled to Doma ben Nesina's village and offered him a fabulous sum of money for the gem. He refused their offer because the key to the chest where the gem lay safeguarded was with his father, and his father lay asleep. Rather than wake his father, he turned down the sage's offer, and they returned to Jerusalem. As a reward for his performance of the commandment of honoring one's father, the next year a red heifer was miraculously born to Doma ben Nesina's herd. In parentheses, it says the red heifer, a unique creation that is born only through a miracle, is essential for the performance of one of the ritual purifications in the time of the Holy Temple. I a little bit take disagree with them that it's creation is born only through a miracle, but obviously it's extremely rare, extremely rare. The sages traveled to Doma ben Hasina again and offered him anything he wanted for the red heifer. Seeing that was all a miracle from God, he took the same amount they were willing to pay him for the precious gem the year before. And this is this wonderful story on which the Talmud is trying to show how far the mitzvah, the commandment of honoring a father and mother, can go. The reason this story is being brought is not to the Talmud's interest, is not to tell a story about this, not, how do I say, just to tell a random story, but the point is to show you an exemplary example of what honoring of parent can be. So that's saying quite something. In other words, that this Ben Noach's honoring of his father was exemplary to an extent that it became the gold standard, the paradigm of how a person should honor their parent. I mean, it's an interesting story in itself, in that, first of all, I mean, the question obviously you may ask yourself is, I mean, wouldn't his father have wanted to be woken up? I mean, or his father wasn't going to get the money. I mean, his father had the key, so clearly, was it his father's possession? Clearly, his father was responsible for it. So if someone is coming, that's one thing. The other thing is, why didn't he just tell them to come back later? It's also bizarre. He refused their offer because his father was sleeping. He said, why don't you come back here? Listen, I'll tell you what. I mean, considering what they were offering for this gem, he could have said, you know what, I'll put you all up in a hotel. Maybe they didn't have a hotel, but you could, listen, I'm going to put you all up someplace. I'll pay for your board by some place where it's kosher, or you could stay here, whatever, you know, with it. And in the morning, or when my father wakes up, we'll go deal with the gem. It's bizarre. Why did he send them? I don't even have an answer to this. I really don't. But it's just a very interesting story that he just didn't want to, he just sent them away. That was it. He refused the offer because his father was sleeping. But really, I think the question I think that I've heard asked is the first one. Like, wouldn't the, because it tells you also something about the mitzvah of honoring a parent. And I mean, it begs the question, is it that Doma ben Hasina knew his father didn't want to be wakened under any circumstances? That his sleep was so important? Or we don't know that, but still, you just don't wake up a father. There's something that isn't right about it. It's a little unclear, but any event, clearly we get the point. The point is that money was of no object. He didn't interfere or disrespect his father, even for a gigantic sum of money that would have made him wealthy. He still didn't do it. So this is really something special. Okay, and because of that, next year he was immediately rewarded. Clearly something very interesting about this person, that somehow he's the benefactor of the temple. I mean, you know, clearly he was a special person. I think that for some reason that he had played such a role in the temple that he has a gem for the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol. I'm assuming, what is this gem for? This gem is for the breastplate of the high priest, probably. And then he ends up having among his cattle the red heifer. It's amazing. Okay. There's also an idea we find that the Tanya, the first Lubavitcher Rebbe brings it in his class of work, Tanya, that there is part of our mission in this world is often to be exemplary in one particular mitzvah, even though we have to keep them all, again, each one according to his responsibilities. But there's often we may each have our own talent, our own particular circumstances in which we exemplify in one mitzvah. I think he gives the example of tzitzis, or the fringed garment. But that's just an example. But here we see Doma ben Nesina, he was exemplary in the mitzvah of honoring his parents. Okay. I think there's something very fundamental related to the Ben Noach that's connected to the mitzvah of honoring a parent. Because, first of all, generally speaking, a parent is a source of a moral authority. They're also a source of identity. And those are two important aspects of fundamental principle of the Bnei Noach is basic, is right and wrong between people. And hopefully we learn from our parents how to behave with other people properly, hopefully. And the other aspect is identity, and in other words, also in terms of, sexual relations and otherwise, but in terms of proper species and familial identity and a proper orderly placement of society. And those are all elements of settling the world, which is part of the goal and mission of the Bnei Noach. So there's a strong connection between this particular mitzvah and the rest of the 7. Okay, now, it says, paragraph 2, or law 2 on page 112. One should be extremely meticulous in honoring and respecting one's mother and father, where it is compared to honoring God. 3 partners share in the creation of a child. The mother and the father provide the child with a body, and God provides a child with a soul. So this is related to what we were talking about before, about gratitude. And the same way that we've granted a soul from God, in a certain sense, we have to get our body from our parents. Of course, that also comes from God, but nevertheless, the direct, the direct givers, those who are actually those who are the benefactors, are the parents, right? So therefore, we have to be very careful in this mitzvah. Okay. 3. What is considered respecting one's parents? One should not occupy the designated place for one's father in a council of elders, nor should one sit at the designated place of one's parents during meals, nor should one publicly contradict the words of one's parent. That's a big one. Wow. So that's very, even as an adult, we have to be careful. It's not an easy thing to do. But it does say in public. So what does it mean in public? What is public? What about in front of your kids? With your grandpa, you're sitting, and your children, and grandpa says something. Are you allowed to contradict him? Is that public or that's not public? I don't know. Probably not. Okay, but the point is also it shouldn't sit in a parent's designated seat at the table. It also seems to imply that a parent should have a designated seat, or that people should have designated seats, like in the old days. I don't really know everyone else, but I tend to remember that my grandfather had a seat at the table. I mean, it's kind of typical. We had a long table for Passover, and he would sit at the head of the table. And grandma would probably sit, I think, at the other end, or maybe on one of his sides. I think she sat at the other end, actually closer to the kitchen and so on. but there should be a designated place. So, okay. I remember stories of big tzaddikim who, even not in public, wouldn't contradict their parents. Even privately, they wouldn't contradict. It's very different than what we're used to today in treatment of parents. You should know, though, there's a concept that a parent can forgive on their honor. And so if they permit certain behavior, you can get away with it with at least not being punished. Again, this is an extra mitzvah for Ben Noach, but nevertheless, okay. So we're making a distinction between respecting and honoring. Respecting, which says not sitting in their place, not contradicting their words in public. What is considered honoring one's parents? One must provide them with food. I'm at paragraph 4 now on page 112. What is considered honoring one's parents? One must provide them with food, drink, and clothing from the parents' own funds. If the parents have no funds, the child is obligated to provide for them from his private charity funds. See this? So it's interesting. It's a little bit of a compromise. A child should provide from the parents' funds. If they don't have the funds, then it should take it from the person's 10th or 5th that they give to charity. One should escort and help them to and from the house and supply all their needs cheerfully. 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 That's an important word. Happily, not begrudgingly. If a child provides even fattened hens for his parents, but does so rudely, he will receive divine punishment. So we can't be disrespectful to the parent, even if we give them the best foods. Now, someone asked a question. It's in the chat here. Becca asked a question. What about if one's parents are Christian and thinks God established the church? Okay. Well, so far, we haven't made any distinction about that. Meaning to say, it doesn't, you still have to respect your parent. Let's put it this way, again, it's not 1 in 7, but the proper behavior for Ben Noach is to respect that parent anyway. So the question is, what about their positions and everything like that? Well, so there's a couple of different issues here. What do you do if the parent says, I want you in church with me on Sunday? What do you do? Well, obviously, so the answer to that is that, obviously God's honor and commandments come first, and you don't have to listen to the parent. So that's one thing. But what if the parent continuously harangues the child or continuously is trying to convince them and so on and so forth? Then what? I think there's a good argument to be made, and in a case like that, the child is not obligated to, honor the parent. Or I could say it this way. There's actually a halacha, he may bring it here, that says that if a person has a parent who's crazy, whose basically his conduct is, not something that's something that the child can deal with, it says he should hire others to take care of him. So similarly, the best case scenario in that case would be to send others to attend to his care. If you know people anyway, for example, if there are other people who are not keeping the 7 laws anyway, and they don't seem to be able to be convinced otherwise, they have nothing really to lose by putting those people with the parent and having them take care of them. That would be one thing. And even not, very often the parent tries harder to influence a child than a stranger, may not bother the stranger much, and also the stranger may not be as influenced by the parent as much. So those are questions of the person's discretion as far as who to send, but the point is, best case scenario would be to spend the money, but have someone else attend to the parent, and maybe visit them once in a blue moon, but not to go there on a regular basis, or they're continuously trying to convince you to practice, idolatrous practices. I mean, I think this is clear from the fact that all the different commandments that are in the Torah that have to do with idolatry, according to, as we've said many times, according to the more strict interpretation, they all apply to the Ben Noach as well. So there's the mitzvah of the famous mitzvah of the, for lack of a better term in English, a seducer, or someone who's trying, an enticer, someone who's trying to entice others to do idolatry, and it says you should have no mercy on that person, right? And it says even if it's a relative or a parent, a brother. So we see clearly, not only are you not obligated to honor them, but you're supposed to inform on them and have them, and that they should be punished. So clearly, you're really, if the parent is trying to convince you to serve idolatry and so on and so forth, person doesn't have any obligation in that case to any extent that they could be affected. Okay. Paragraph 5. If one's mother or father are sleeping and the keys to the child's place of business is under the head, it is forbidden to wake them even if there would be a loss of profit. Wow. But if the parents would benefit from the profit and be saddened by the loss if they were not awakened, it is the child's duty to awaken them and cause them to rejoice over the situation. So it's really a question of what does the parent want? What would make the parent happy? And if they be saddened by the loss, they certainly should be woken up. So incredibly, it sounds like from this that Doma ben Nesina's father had no portion in ownership of the gem and would have been upset to be woken up. So, I mean, first of all, we see something interesting about the relationship between Doma and Nesina's father. I mean, should I say his father wasn't the nicest guy? I mean, his son could have made, I mean, personally, if I know my son would make a couple $1 million, I'd be happy to wake up for him that his life should be so improved. I mean, to think that his father was in such a state that he would have not been happy and have been grumpy and unhappy of being waking up is a little incredible to me. But that evidently was a situation which only makes Doma ben Nesina seem all the much more of a righteous person, even though his father apparently wasn't the nicest guy. He certainly wasn't the nicest to him. Didn't care about his, financial future so much, at least in terms of, in terms of him accumulating wealth, he wasn't evidently not concerned. So, unless you say Doma ben Nesina was already a rich man. If he was a rich man, why was he living in a little village? It's a little bit strange. Anyway, so this is what we see from this, that Doma's honor for his parent was even such that it really was something that was unique, that he went against his grain to do the right thing to honor his parent. It wasn't just love. In other words, he wasn't doing it because he just felt like doing that, because he and his dad were so tight. They were such good friends. There's such love all around. Not necessarily. It seems that he was doing it because of the mitzvah. And maybe that's why the sages tell us this story, because Doma seems to have been doing it because it was the right thing, because it was under the 7 laws, the right thing to do. And as he understood, and maybe even learned from the sages and from Jewish thought somehow, because in those days there was a lot of Jewish influence, again, in the Roman cultured populace at that time. So it's very possible that clearly he did this not out of, he was so close with his dad, but because it was the right thing. Okay. Next paragraph. If, however, the parent intentionally wanted to cause the son or daughter a financial loss, for example, by throwing away money, the child can stop the parent. This is only where the parent has no means of reimbursing the child, or the child takes legal recourse. Some say that even if the parent has the means of reimbursing the child in order to avoid the anguish of a legal battle. The money has already been thrown away. One may not shout at or insult the parent, but may quietly initiate legal proceedings. Unbelievably interesting. So a parent is destroying the possessions or money of a child, then you can stop them. But even then there's a question. Maybe if you could, maybe it's better off just to bring them to court instead of getting into some type of a fight with them. Maybe better leave it alone. But we end up by saying, well, and so, well, everybody agrees though, if the parent can't reimburse, then you can try to grab the money away from them before they throw it off a cliff or whatever it is, throw it into the sea or whatever. But some say that the anguish of a legal battle would cause more harm to the parent, and better just stop them from doing something crazy, stop them from just destroying the money. Of course, there's a third option, which is the child just forgoes the money and just lets it happen and just doesn't do anything. I mean, there is that other option. What we're saying is halachically, you're not obligated to do that. You don't have to forfeit money because a parent is acting crazy. Or even if they're not acting crazy, I guess, maybe they're trying to punish the child. I don't know. But, okay. Once it's done, though, you can't shout or insult them, which a little bit implies that you can shout or insult them to stop them from throwing out the money, but once they've done it already, you can't. But I don't think that's the case. I mean, you certainly can't insult a parent. You just can try, vigorously to stop them, even if that means being authoritative with them, even if that might mean physically trying to grab them. But I don't think there's any really permission to insult. I don't understand. I don't think insulting is a necessary prerequisite of stopping them from destroying money. Anyway, okay. Let's see paragraph 6. If the child needs a favor from the community and knows that the favor will be granted because of the esteem in which his parent is held, and the child also knows that he can obtain the favor based on his own position of esteem, he should not say, do it for me because of me, but rather do it for me because of my parent. This way it is an honor for the parent. If, however, the request can be made without personal mention, one does not have to mention the parent. Okay. So a person is making a request, and it's important that they mention a merit. If they can mention either theirs or their parent, they should mention the parent because that brings honor to the parent. Okay. But if there's no need to mention anybody, you don't have to mention the parent. Okay, number 7 looks very interesting. Let's take a look at the paragraph for halacha 7. Suppose a mother asks her child to do a task, and the child complies, and then later the father asks, "Who told you to do this?" If the child feels that by stating, "Mother told me to do it," the father will become angry at the mother, then the child should incur the father's wrath rather than implicate the mother. How interesting is that? And also how maybe relevant, unfortunately, in some people's situations, if they have a father or a parent with an anger problem or something of that nature, then you may wonder, are you allowed to, be dishonest to a parent? And the halakha is telling you can. It's very interesting. Okay. All right. Okay. Let's see. Let's do a little bit. Let's stop over here. Very, very fascinating. You know what? I just got to do the next one. One more. It's a one-liner. Paragraph 8 or law 8. Children must rise and remain standing in the presence of their mother or father. Wow. That's quite something. Person should remain standing. Boy, that's a whole different approach, isn't it? I mean, than compared to the casual way people behave today. Feet on the table when the parent comes into with his shorts, with their shoes off, their feet on the table. Anyway, it's hard even to really comprehend this. most parents would forgive and wouldn't insist on a child remaining standing while a parent is present. But some people are careful to stand up when a parent enters a room. But it's really not very, it's not super common. But just try to do it. Try to do it. I think it's good for us to try to do it. It's good for our humility. It's good, a lesson of, gratitude and respect. It's a good thing to do. Okay, let's see. We're up to here. So we were talking about Noah, and we were in the chapter called the Torah of Shem. I don't know if we read the covenants. So on page 48 of the book, The World of the Ger, he reviews the different covenants after the flood. It says, after Noah survived the flood, God made a second covenant with him. It says in Genesis chapter 9, verses 8 through 17. God spoke to Noah and to his sons with him, saying, as for me, behold, I establish my covenant with you, with your seed after you, with every living creature that is with you, the fowl, the cattle, and every beast of the earth with you, to all that go out of the ark, even every beast of the earth. And I will establish my covenant with you. Never again will all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood, nor will there be another flood to destroy the earth. So, this can be read, very broadly or very narrowly. Generally seems to be, it seems like there are many commentators that read it in a narrow fashion. What I mean by that is that the covenant is saying that God promises never to destroy the world with a flood. What about destroying the world in some other means? It only says with a flood. I mean, is that specific to a flood? It's kind of not a very powerful covenant if it just means a flood, literally. I mean, it isn't saying so much, is it? I mean, is it? I promise that I'm not going to knock you out with punch you in the face, but kicking out, I'm not promising. I mean, it doesn't really mean much if it's just a flood. I mean, it's kind of it's a little bit strange. But then I was thinking one of the reasons for this may be because it's only through a flood that God could really destroy all life on earth, meaning to say all land animals. Because the water fills everything. And so everything on the earth dies because it's completely covered and everything drowns. However, through other methods, if there be an earthquake or I don't know, some very, look, I could get crazy hot. I mean, that's possible. But I guess other means of earthquakes and so on, they probably wouldn't kill everybody. That might be one answer, but I know that the commentaries do say that, but God never said he wouldn't destroy a part of the world with a flood. But there isn't a lot of comments as far as what about destroying the whole world? Ross mentioned, what about a drought or a famine? It's a good question or a good point. So you wouldn't destroy the whole world with a drought or a famine. Ross, what's your view on this?
I've heard some other teachings that point out the similarities. When at the beginning of Genesis, early on, we see that the water is covered with earth. The earth is covered with water. And then on the third day, Hashem says, let dry land appear. And then eventually the animals. It's essentially a flood story here, And then we come forward to Noah, and it's the same situation. The world is covered with water. And then the dry land eventually appears, and then the animals are reintroduced and so forth. So it's almost like phase one, phase two, or part one, part two of the same type of story.
So it's a recreation. It's like there was the original creation of land and its animals and its living things, and then it's like a do-over.
Exactly.
Recover the earth with water and start over again.
Yes.
And that's why it's particularly water. Anyone else have any comments on this question about why God specifically promised about water? And where does that leave us with other type of disasters, or what's the intention here? Any other ideas or anything else? Any other points? Okay. Yeah, I think it sounds like, Ross, that's a great point, because that, in other words, basically what that would be telling us, what God's really saying is, I'm never going to do another do-over, which would include other types of destructions. But the point is, this is the type of destruction that God would choose because it's a do-over. It means I'll never again cover the world in water and then start over again fresh. This is it. This is the world, Noah's world, and the world that begins after coming out of the ark. This is the world, and I'm going to, deal with you. It's kind of like we're married. You're my spouse. Whatever it is, we're going to deal with it from here on in. There's not going to be any do-overs. It seems to be what God is telling Noah and the animals all the creatures that were in the ark. I'm not going to start over again and wipe everything clean. We're going to go from you, whatever it is, even if it's a little stormy and rough here and there. This is what it is. So, like last week, Torah portion about the spies, where God says to Moses, okay, look, I'm going to start over from you. And Moses says, no, I don't, that's no good. What is Egypt going to say? And so on and so forth. And so it's interesting that God there from him, almost, not quite, because Moses is still from the patriarchs, but he's almost saying, I want a divorce. Well, worse than that. I want to be a widower. Let's start over again. But chas v'shalom. But I mean, just saying there is a similarity there in terms of the point is that there's almost a point where God is saying, I want to start over. And then Moses convinces God, no, we're not going to start over. We're going to deal, even though it's rocky and there's problems, but we're going to deal with the people as they are. And I think that's similar to what's happening here with Noah. And there's an anticipation by God that the world, according to judgment, really was not going to be able to stand. And that has to do with also the next portion that we're about to say. So let's go on. At this time, God explained the sign of the rainbow, and God said, this is the sign of the covenant which I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for everlasting generations. I have put my bow in the cloud, and it shall be for a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. And it shall come to pass when I bring clouds over the earth, and the bow is seen in the cloud, I will remember my covenant between me and you and every living creature of all flesh, and the water shall no more become a flood to destroy all flesh. And the bow shall be in the cloud, and I will look upon it, that I may remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is upon the earth. So basically, this is understood to mean that really it could be a moment of judgment in which God, from a certain aspect, really would be in a position of right, having the right to destroy the world, but he won't, because he will remember the covenant. So, I mean, this idea of covenant is such a powerful, powerful thing and fascinating thing, and so contrary to modern notions about what's smart and what, the point is, why does God make a covenant? Covenant, he says, this is forever. I'm making a promise from here on in. I will not destroy the world. I'm going to have a rainbow. I'm going to recall this promise I made. And even if things get bad, I will not destroy the world. I mean, it's an amazing thing. First of all, who's forcing him to do this? He doesn't have to do this. He saved Noah. Noah should say thank you and go about his business. I mean, what is all this? Why does God make this covenant? I mean, if you and I were God, we probably wouldn't make this covenant. I mean, I'll just speak for myself. I probably wouldn't. You guys messed up before. I don't know if I can put up with it next time. I make no promises. We'll see how it goes. Right? I mean, maybe it's, think about it. It's like when a marriage or relationship begins and everything's fresh and bright, and that's when we make promises. Once we start getting disappointed, that's when we make the promises. Here, God makes a promise after he's disappointed. Fascinating thing. Not before when everything's rosy. So that's interesting. But of course, that's why you need a promise, which we need to think about this very deeply. Again, interesting in terms of marriage, that, people think it's the first way. I'm making all these promises because everything is so rosy and perfect and everything's great. But no, maybe that's not the case at all. Maybe we're making these promises because we know there are going to be problems. And we promise to stick with it anyway. Maybe that's the point. Isn't that what the point here? God is saying, I know you guys. I know you're going to mess up, really. Not just mess up. You're going to get so bad that really there should be a judgment to destroy everything. But I won't. We'll deal with it somehow. We'll work it out. Ross? Yeah.
It's the story is just repeated, whether it's with Noah or, the same similar situation with the children of Israel. I know you're going to get into the land. I know you're going to turn to idols. I know you're going to forget about me, and you're going to break the covenant. And whether it's just, with Noah or the children of Israel in the land, it's the same situation. My covenant is here. If you want it, it's conditional. You take hold of it and you live by it. There's blessings. You choose to ignore it, then there is a reward for that as well. It's measure for measure.
But is the covenant with Noah measure for measure? Is it reciprocal? Does it say any place in the covenant with Noah that you have to keep these laws?
No, I don't believe that it's a you must or else. It's just it's been the same with Adam. Don't kill, don't murder, don't
right,
so forth. And apparently things got so bad that there was a judgment. And had not Hashem made that judgment, we would have self-destructed.
Yeah.
Which, nature hates a vacuum.
Which creates nature hates a vacuum. Yeah, but it's interesting about these covenants also is that we don't see, at least we don't see, expressly written that God said, and this is what you have to do for me. It doesn't expressly say that. Later on, it starts talking about murder and suicide and different things that a person is not allowed to do, and animals are not allowed to kill human beings. I think that says later on. It's not clearly connected, though. You can look in Parshas Noah, in Genesis over there, probably around chapters, 9 and 10. But this seems to be just a promise God's making. It's almost as if God is saying, it's almost like he's saying, I did something wrong here. It's almost like, why do you make a promise? You make a promise because, and this is really what's happening here. The promise is made because God's creations have lost trust in him. Okay? Because, in other words, Noah wants to know, should I get off the ark? Is there even any point? Or are you just going to destroy everything again? So why even bother? Like, why should we even have children? It's kind of like today with the with the global climate change and all that. Why should we even have children? There's no point. The world's gonna just blow up anyway, so there's no point. That's what a lot of these young people are saying, right? So that's what Noah was feeling at that time. He actually experienced it, and the animals, I guess, might have been affected too. You know, it's hard for us to understand an animal's thinking. Does an animal think? I don't know, but you know, but nice. But the point is, this promise was, strangely enough, even though God didn't really do anything wrong, but almost like he did something wrong. It's almost like, you know, where, you know, mother makes, I don't know. I mean, just an example popping into my head, you know, mother bakes cookies for her children. The kids throw them around and, you know, throw them in the garbage. And she says, I'm never making cookies for you again, unless you promise never to do that again, you know? And in other words, what I'm saying here is the promise here implies that God did something wrong. I mean, but again, it's not that he did something wrong, it's just that faith has been lost in the fact that the world is going to continue. And then Noah doesn't know, if he just doesn't have the strength to know, you know, to carry on. Do his children have the strength to carry on? So therefore, God makes this promise that I'm not going to destroy the world again, and you should procreate and you know and feel confident that the world will continue. Of course, yeah, this is clearly a pronouncement against these climate change, or anybody who's saying that the world is going to self-destruct, and you know, like the old TV show, this message will self-destruct in, what is it, 5 seconds or whatever it was. Anyway, so this world is not going to self-destruct in 5 seconds, or anything else for that matter. This is the promise. We don't have to worry about that, evidently. And even though people do really, really bad things in which the world deserves to be destroyed, God won't do it. God won't do it. I think that this planet is a lot more resilient than people think. Anyway, I don't want to get to, you know, I try to avoid getting into politics, but nevertheless, I think there is that point here clearly, that there's a promise that the world will not be destroyed. And I think within, embedded in that promise, is the ability for the earth to somehow rejuvenate and somehow survive a lot of different problems. That the world will continue until God's objective here is finished, not before. Ross, your fingers up, hand up, something?
Yeah, it's again, it just goes right back. It's not that, well, I mean, it would seem like, yes, okay, he made a mistake, but he gave the Torah for mankind. Okay, don't steal, don't murder, don't lie. And that is for mankind. And he's essentially saying, you know, I can keep destroying the world and start everything over again, or you can just learn how to live this way, live by the way I tell you. And if you choose not to, then you will self-destruct. And look at where we are today. We can go through the list. You take God out of church, you stop the prayers, divide the family, just to go down the list, everything to push God out of the way. Becca, but he's saying here's the laws in the desert, take them, and if you want to have a civilization, this is how you do it. It doesn't matter if it's Israel or the world. This is how you live. Becca has something. I'll stop.
Becca, please.
I just wanted to hit on something that Ross had said about it being conditional, and then it doesn't say specifically that the promise was conditional. Well, I was wondering about, like, before the flood, he told Noah, take 7 pairs of the clean and 2 of the unclean. Well, how did he know? He assumed that Noah already knew, because it doesn't specify which ones are clean and which ones aren't. So I wondered if maybe it was kind of like that. He knew what maybe Noah knew what the conditions were. He knew that there would be blessings or whatever if life would be good if he followed the plan, and it would not be good if they didn't. I mean, maybe things wouldn't be destroyed in a worldwide flood, but we've had different areas where there have been natural disasters, floods or whatever in certain spots. And so I always kind of wonder, well, is God kind of fed up with those people right now? Is he trying to tell them something?
Yeah.
So anyway, that was just my little 2 cents, that maybe he did know what the conditions were and he didn't have to specify. I don't know.
It's funny because I was initially, I was leaning to say, and I think we are saying here to an extent that there, and I disagree with Ross to a certain extent. I don't think that, meaning to say, the promise here is that God is saying, I will not destroy the world, even if you guys deserve it. I will not do that. Okay? Now, there is a kind of a, how do I say, there's a footnote there, or fine print, and that is that I'm not going to destroy the world, but that doesn't mean I can't punish you. It doesn't mean that I can't, shock and awe a little to knock you into shape so that things don't go too off course. In fact, it's a little bit implied. It's saying, I won't destroy the world again with a flood. Okay, but I may do some other stuff, so look out. It's that I think is implied. I won't, but he's just saying that God is saying that to this extent, a total destruction won't happen. There are going to be, there will be a response to bad moral behavior, but not on that scale. There's going to be a limit. This is my world, and I'm going to deal with the world that I have. Again, it's similar as in a relationship, where if the person is abusing the other spouse, they may need to take some type of action to shake that person up, if possible, to discipline them in some way and say, enough, I'm not going to accept this, or I'm not going to do X if you keep doing Y. Sometimes that might be, it's sad if that's necessary. It's not a good situation, but it may be. But you don't break off the marriage. And that's basically what God Almighty is saying here. Blessed be He. He's saying that I'm not going to end the story. I'll deal with it. Will you make, if you misbehave, I may have to punish you, and back and forth. But a total destruction where I wipe the slate clean and we start over, I'm not going to do that again. So I think it fits so well into the point that Ross made before about the flood means a clean slate, a new creation over from the beginning. We go back to tohu vavohu. We go back to the chaos, and the world's covered with water, and then you start over again. That's what the flood seems to represent. Complete, washed away, clean. It's interesting because in Chassidus, it does talk about how the flood is compared to a mikveh. It's compared to the waters of purification. So that things were completely purified, all the, how should I say, the impurities and the evils of the door of the generation of the flood were washed away. The world was purified, and we started fresh. So it seems that God is saying, I'm not going to take that approach again. We're going to deal with what we have right here now with the generation of Noah's generation, which also shows you something, again, very positive about Noah in terms of this is a start, which is fascinating because Adam was this like Superman. Our sages say he could, quote, see from one side of the earth to the other. He was like a giant. He was, obviously God spoke to him many times. And, they just speak about how he had this incredible soul, which was, equivalent to the 600,000 souls of Israel and all this stuff. And yet he was a failure, and Noah succeeded in a way even though, again, maybe he wasn't even as great as Abraham, and yet he succeeded where Adam failed. In this way, he preserved the world permanently, somehow. So that's an amazing, amazing thing. And maybe it's because his direct involvement in kindness and taking care of the animals for those 40 days, well, it was more than 40, it was 120 days that he was in the ark, that he took care of the animals, and he was completely devoted to the commandments he was given. He was completely devoted. And so the earth that came out was a plant where, so it was a place in which man was, completely bound in acts of kindness and self-sacrifice for the rest of creation, for the rest of the creatures of the world. So it was a unique new beginning, which started with humility and caring. And maybe that was just a really good start. Think about it. That's the way to start a world, isn't it? That's the way to start a relationship, Okay. Any questions or comments on anything that we discussed tonight? I think that's pretty much it for tonight. I mean, there's this relationship a little bit between the two things that we studied, because we talked about how honoring a parent is related to honoring God, and how God created us, and here we're having it. God recreates the world with Noah, almost partners with him, so to speak, and then promises never to destroy the world again. Okay, so it's good news, because because there's certainly a lot of scary talk out there and news and whatever. There's always something. It's just unbelievable. It's the climate or war with some other country, or this or that, some other disaster. I don't understand. Like, we hadn't have a hard enough year. Seems like there's always something else on the news. Anyway, so the point is to have no fear. The world is not going to be destroyed. It's going to be okay. Hashem is in charge. Does that mean that there's not going to be any suffering? I can't promise you that. But we can know one thing, that if we put our trust in Hashem, that suffering definitely will be very, very much softened, and we will be able to survive and be given the strength to get through whatever comes our way. That I do know. Okay. Laila Tov, everyone.